How often do you think about the Oscars? About how many Oscar-winning films there are and how many you've seen? Yeah, there's a few famous Oscar-winning films that we've all seen. You know, The Godfather and Lord of the Rings and Titanic. I'm King of the World, all that stuff. But the Oscars have been running since 1927. There are currently over 1,000 films, feature-length films, which have won an Oscar. How many have you seen? I did the numbers for myself. It's not many, and I consider myself quite a movie buff. So here then is the premise of this podcast. Every episode, I and a rotating cast of two guests will randomly select one of the 1,000 films that have won an Oscar, watch it, and talk about it, with the only requirement being that one of the three people on each episode has to have never seen the movie before we talk about it. That will get difficult with Star Wars. Please note that our coverage of a movie does not constitute an endorsement of it. My least favorite movie of 2016, David Ayer's Suicide Squad, won an Oscar for Best Makeup, while my favorite movie of 2016, The Handmaiden, wasn't even nominated for anything. Please also note that our coverage of a movie is not a blanket endorsement of any or all of the people involved in it. A lot of terrible people have won Oscars. Kevin Spacey won an Oscar 20 years before he was outed as an abuser, and Roman Polanski won one 20 years after. But every film, good, bad, or in many cases mediocre, that has won an Oscar is an important part of film history just for being there. And they all, on some level, deserve a tiny bit of consideration, even if that consideration ends up concluding that it's garbage. And with all of that in mind, I'm your host, as always, Ellie McConaughey, and with me today is Edric.
Hey, everyone.
And River Lane.
Now we all agree that celebrity is not a people.
you know, if I speak...
I didn't know the Muppets were based like that.
If I speak, I'm getting a visit from the FBI.
For legal reasons, NSA, this is a joke.
With a mortar launcher. That was, but for legal reasons, FBI, NSA, CIA, that is a Whitest Kids You Know reference. I'm referencing the Whitest Kids You Know do not come to my house. And we are here today to talk about The Muppets, not the concept, the 2011 film that won Best Original Song at the 84th Academy Awards.
Fuck severely. Next question.
All right, let's go to the next movie. We're talking about the... I mean, like, I have a lot of notes on this movie, but they're mostly just like, that was funny, that was cute, that irritated me, you know. I think that was a Simpsons joke they just stole.
So there are two kinds of Muppet movies, right? There is the Muppets playing themselves, a la this movie, the original Muppet movie, and Muppets Take Manhattan, which is sort of a thin line, but it's mostly a Muppets playing themselves movie. Whereas there's also the Muppets as actors playing characters movie, which is A Muppet Christmas Carol, The Great Muppet Caper, and like The Muppet Wizard of Oz and The Treasure Island and what have you. And as far as like when Jason Segel woke up and decided to write a Muppet movie, he wrote the Muppets as themselves, and in a soft reboot that I understand where it is coming from, and it is kind of the only logical move you can kind of make for the Muppets where they were in 2011.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. The film is honestly kind of obsessed with the Muppets as not necessarily as a brand, as like an emotional anchor for a lot of people, which is one of the things that actually kind of like bugs me about the movie. We'll get into it, but it is interesting that this is the first Muppet movie made like theatrically released since '98, and it's also like they'd focused very heavily, except for Muppets in Space, I want to say, was a Muppets as themselves movie. I could be wrong. It's been a very long time since I saw that one.
I think Muppets in Space is a Muppets as themselves, but like again, it's sort of a fringe case like Muppets Take Manhattan, where it doesn't track as continuity, which is a dumb thing that Muppet movies should not have, and I hate that I'm thinking of themselves that way.
Absolutely.
But considering that this movie considers Kermit and Piggy's wedding at the end of Muppets Take Manhattan as a proper wedding, which is where that torn photograph is from. It's from Muppets Take Manhattan, a movie I have seen way too much of.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, if you have not seen Muppets Take Manhattan and you graduated as a creative, go watch Muppets Take Manhattan again and sob your eyes out, because that movie is entirely about being a post-grad creative in a world that does not want to support post-grad creatives.
Ow.
It's, oh man, oh man.
It's just, and so like after Jim Henson's death, the Muppets very much focused very heavily on the Muppets as actors in a movie. Christmas Carol, Treasure Island, Wizard of Oz, which sucks. And I don't know. I think it's really interesting that in a reboot, it's a light reboot. It's, oh god, I'm about to make the worst reference I could, and I'm sorry in advance. It's like how in the Halloween franchise, every third or fourth movie, they're like, no, we're going back to just be a sequel to the first or maybe the second movie. We're not counting any of the ones that have come out in between then.
Yeah. Well, so like reading the IMDb trivia page, Jason Segel, was like, I wrote, his purpose with writing this was basically like, we're coming into a generation that doesn't have like there is no Muppet Show, because like we didn't have a streaming service yet that carried the Muppet Show. It was just whatever the DVDs your parents had laying around, or what DVDs you could get from Blockbuster. I think Hollywood Studios was dead by that point.
Blockbuster was pretty much dead by that point, by 2011 too.
Yeah, so you're sort of in this dark area where, like, if you are a kid who didn't have parents who were into the Muppets, then you kind of didn't know who they were. And I deeply sympathize with that instinct of, no, I want to give the people make them feel the spectrum of human emotion via a green piece of felt with ping pong ball eyes.
It is very kind of like, so I do have a lot of problems with the positioning of the Muppets as like this beautiful innocent thing from a bygone age of innocent blah 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 blah. They do that a lot. People talk about them that way a lot, and this movie, it doesn't quite go that far, but it's like it's in the ballpark. I have a lot of issues with that. I think that my problem with a lot of modern Muppet movies is Jim Henson was a lunatic who always wanted to find new ways to fucking puppet that thing, and they just stopped doing that. And that is a problem that I have with this movie. There's nothing as insane as the bike riding sequence or the scene where the Muppets climb the wall.
Yeah, I did watch Great Muppet Caper right after this movie, and man, that the scaling the building sequences in that movie is so fucking funny.
And like then you look up how they did it, and you're just sitting there going like, "You're insane, Jim."
No, the most insane is putting Jim underwater in a metal tank and making him have a frog play the banjo in a swamp.
Yeah, that's sort of like what I'm saying. Like I miss, puppetry is. Patrick Willems has a great video on like the lost art of puppetry.
Yeah, the puppet movie. That video is great.
The long and short is that prior to basically Jurassic Park, if you needed an effect that you couldn't achieve via makeup, you were using claymation or you were using a puppet. Honestly, a lot of the time, a combination of the two. And like there were some insanely good puppets made during the 80s. Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors is a deranged good puppet.
Yeah, you have to film it at half speed to get it to move the way you need it to because it's so fucking big. But it's incredible.
It looks incredible. Or all the puppets from The Thing. The dude's head with spider legs. That shit fucking rules.
Yeah.
And I feel like as we've gotten older and as CGI's gotten better, the Muppets start to feel a little bit like an affectation in a good way. And I just wish they were trying to like push more of the puppetry aspect forward. At least that's my opinion. You can say that I'm an idiot.
I think for me, the funniest shot in this movie is putting a snorri cam on a puppet. That's fucking hilarious.
That you know what, fair. I did like that.
Putting a snorri cam on Walter was a very funny move. But I think for me, it's the Muppets are like the Muppets to me are not just the puppets. It is the human instinct of like, I'm holding a conversation with the puppet, but the actor's down there,
Mm-hmm.
And I think this movie has a strong sympathy for that instinct and what that part of the Muppets is. And I think that's more this movie's point is the idea of like we acknowledge, like, when I say I feel the whole spectrum of emotion via a green piece of felt with ping pong ball eyes, I was watching the movie last night. I've seen this movie multiple times. I saw this movie in theaters when it came out in 2011 because I was 11 years old. Of course I did.
Ow.
But like, coming out of that, like, I've seen all these movies multiple times, and I was watching it last night. Why am I tearing up over the Rainbow Connection?
You poor thing.
The Rainbow Connection is the perfect song. I will hear no arguments to the contrary.
No, that's sort of the thing. Like, I think that Rainbow Connection is one of those songs that, like, it got me. It got me a little bit because, like, I don't know. Like, my mom used to tear up when we watched the Muppet movie and they played Rainbow Connection over the and I don't know. Like, there is something there. There's something about it.
My internet boss, Overly Sarcastic Productions, Red wrote a tweet. I'm gonna see if I can find it. Basically being like, you gotta experience the whole spectrum of human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking hate the redesign of fucking Apple Photos. It sucks. It's so bad. It's so bad. Anything on a screen smaller than an iPad, it is a terrible design. Interface. I hate it.
I will say that, as much as I love the end, the big old asterisk, I don't know. I have some issues with Walter as a character. He reads a little bit too close to self-insert OC, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Although, knowing that Jason Segel wrote it and then put himself in the movie or not Jason Segel, James Bobbin wrote it, didn't he?
I think they co-wrote it because I think Jason Segel gets a writing credit.
Jason Segel bagging Amy Adams makes no sense to me. And I don't know why he's treating her in such a way that her first song in the movie is basically Me and You and Your Friend Steve by Garfunkel and Oates.
Truly.
I do love that Mary is never, like, completely antagonized by the narrative, because it would be so easy to antagonize Mary in a narrative like this. But she is like, no, I'm gonna help my boyfriend and his brother, do this little side quest so long as I still get my anniversary to myself. And she understandably dumps him when it goes awry, and when he comes back and realizes he fucked up, like, it's understandable. And I love that she's a shop teacher, and I love that, like, she is willing, like, she's not happy that she's going it solo, but she's independent enough to, like, no, I'm gonna still have fun solo,
Mm-hmm.
Me Party fucks as a song.
Me Party does fuck as a song. It's a little bit too close to a song about masturbation.
It is.
But like, that's in keeping with the Muppets, because every Muppets joke is like 2 inches away from being a dirtier joke than initially conceived. Like, if you go back and watch the original Muppet Show, there are so many jokes that are just like 2 inches away from being way dirtier than should be allowed.
And the original pilot is called The Muppet Show, Sex and Violence.
Yeah.
I was just listening to it. I'm like, speaking of I'm referencing a lot of songs today. I was listening to it. I'm like, this is like Party for One by Carly Rae Jepsen. That song's just about jerking it or jilling it, I guess, for her.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean for our first kids movie to be to get this dirty this fast.
Such is the nature of the Muppets.
Such is the nature of the Muppets. Yeah, I don't. There's something kind of like odd about Walter as a character. I don't know if I can put my finger on it.
He's neurodivergent coded without the specific structure in place.
I was more thinking about what the mechanics are of Muppet and a human being brothers.
No, I don't want to fucking think about that. That falls under the same department of Kermit and Fozzie are twins, okay?
Honestly, that's no worse than me wondering aloud in the middle of ROTC class while watching Transformers how they reproduced.
They build new ones, I presume.
Oh, I bet you $5 that if you ask any actual Transformers fan, there is an answer for that. Because apparently, Transformers is like, what if you made your Hot Wheels Greek mythology? To the point where my friend is writing a grad paper about it.
I don't know too much about the Transformers lore outside of the Michael Bay movies. I've only seen Bumblebee. That's it. Like the Michael Bay movies and Bumblebee. Not even the new movies that are coming out. I haven't seen them.
I saw Transformers 1 under threat from my friends, and it was pretty okay. Did I understand any of it outside of what the movie needed me to understand? No. Did I inappropriately laugh at some lines that were said with like such dead set intention, but like for anyone who doesn't know the lore is a fucking ridiculous sentence to have an actor say out loud? Yes.
Unfortunately, I've seen the Wahlberg Transformers.
Ugh.
Unfortunately.
There's something else. Those movies, those Wahlberg movies.
Anyway.
I do know. I don't know much about Transformers lore, but I do have a friend who's really into it, and she occasionally like autistic info dumps me about them. Hi, Bun, I love you. And I do know that RC in the comics is a transbian, so there's stuff happening in the Transformers. I don't know what.
Yeah.
No, like I'm just sitting there wondering the mechanics of a Muppet being brother with a human. But before I can even think about that, I'm like watching the opening song, going like, "You haven't altered your house in any way to make it accessible to your literal brother." He has to like swing himself off the door. I know it's a joke, but it's a telling joke.
Yeah, I just think it's a weird. I do love the opening number. I do love Life's a Happy Song. Another song that unironically somehow gets to me. And I also like, as much as I hate in musicals when the diegesis of like this song is happening and whatchamacallit, like the idea that like, brain, work with me here. Can you tell I'm only just finishing coffee? The idea of like the musical number being interrupted by somebody who wasn't privy to the fact that the musical number was happening, sort of thing. Like I hate that. It's so bad. Like that is my one quibble with Me Party, is I do appreciate that only the waitress is the one who interrupts and not any of the other dining patrons about that. But the scene at the end of Life's a Happy Song when they're like, okay, they're gone, and everyone just
Yeah,
collapses to the ground. That's a good joke.
that's a solid joke. Yeah. No, I like Life's a Happy Song a lot. I think it's I like the increasing difficulty of rhyming until they just literally give up.
Life's a fillet of fish. Yes, it is.
Decent bit right there. If nothing else, no matter what, I want to be clear to the audience. I am going to be a tiny bit mean about this movie. It's really funny. It's still really funny. I like it a lot. I'm being a little harsh on it because like I like to be serious about movies, and I like being serious about the Muppets. But I like this movie a lot.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of which, Edric, it was your first. You're our first timer, right, on this one?
Yes, I am.
Hey.
And I have virtually no experience with the Muppets until now, so.
Criminal. Did Kermit kill your father?
I wish.
Give Kermit a knife.
Realistically, Piggy would be the one to kill him.
Oh, 1,000%. Piggy would drop kick him into the sun.
Piggy is willing, able, and excited to do violence.
I love this for her.
Honestly, Piggy is one of my favorite Muppets, just because. I mean, like I'm a overweight trans woman. I fail to meet a lot of the requirements to be what society considers to be an attractive woman. Don't like argue with me on that one. That's just like me stating a fact. So having this woman who's not only considered like desirable, but also is incredibly confident about it. I love Miss Piggy. I love her to death.
I am very firm Scooter Gonzo, depending on the mood, because I am a whatever. I would do dangerous stunts for the bit, but I am also completely a stage manager in an underprepared setting where a stage manager should be not, like, should barely be qualified, you know?
I mean, like I play D&D with you, River. I know that you will do dangerous stunts given the opportunity.
Morgan hasn't done anything that stupid.
Tokyo drifting a fucking carriage, River.
We had to get out of town. I do. Okay, I have two things about the villain of this movie.
The fact that he says maniacal laugh instead of action maniacal laughing, good bit. Good
Yeah.
solid bit.
Apparently, this was because there's a cut song where, like, as a kid, he never learned how to laugh, so he just doesn't know how, and that's why the ending, when he actually like laughs at Fozzie's shitty joke, is like the thing that like cracks him into having a change of heart. Along with a head injury.
Did they cut it because God love you Muppets? His song is fucking raw agony.
It is pretty bad. No, what I think is funniest is apparently that character was written for Alan Rickman.
Huh.
A shame.
And that is so funny. Trying to picture this movie with Alan Rickman as the bad guy is fucking insane.
That is, I mean, like, I can see it. I like Alan Rickman. I will see him in anything. Honestly, very good, generally very good use of your celebrities. I, in particular, am always very excited to see Kristen Shaw, the sound of audio chaos.
Is she the anger management coach?
She is.
I only know her as the voice of Maple Pines.
She's also Louise in Bob's Burgers, the little girl with the rabbit ears who also is willing, able, and eager to do violence.
Yeah, I think I literally just said, "Oh, hi, Mabel."
And as far back as like Flight of the Conchords, if you need someone to sound utterly unhinged, Kristen Shaw's your girl.
Yeah. So the other thing I have is a funny joke about Uncle Deadly, or a funny fact about Uncle Deadly. So when I was in Disney as like a real little kid, I was at the pub in the British part of World Showcase, and my mom and I were having dinner. And the waiter at the time recognized that I was in that weird period where like I'm too old to do some of the like the real little kid things, but I'm too young to drink.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm trying to find my joy in Disney still. And he gave me a sheet of paper and he's like, name as many, British Disney characters as you can. And I, pedantic trivia nerd that I am, immediately started scrawling out a list of them, including but not limited to the ones I can remember off the top of my head were like the standard answers, Sean Bean's character in National Treasure, because I was really into National Treasure as a kid. And I listed Uncle Deadly. And he's like, I don't know if that one counts. And I'm like, no, he's the only Muppet with an actual British accent, even though you could argue that all of the Muppets are kind of British. He's the one with an actual British accent. Because I'd seen 2011 Muppets movie. And he's like, you know what? I'll give that to you. Okay. I think I got I think I either got like a comp dessert or like a button for it. But like, yeah. knowing Uncle Deadly as the actual British Muppet, as it were.
I meant to say this earlier when you brought up Scooter being your favorite. I have to say, mean jokes though they are, Scooter being at Apple and Sam the Eagle being at Fox News are really good.
Scooter is at Google.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Google. It's just like it's so good. It's so them.
I thought Sam the Eagle was an MSNBC pun more than a Fox News pun. Because I think the set was more CNN, MSNBC.
I thought it was Fox News.
No, it was. I think it was too clean to be. It was too like well put together to be Fox. It looks more like an MSNBC, CNN.
Okay, so the set looks like a CNN, but the logo in the corner looks like a Fox News one.
Yeah.
I'm sticking with it being a Fox News thing just because that feels like something. Again, like that's we've mentioned that the Muppets jokes are always like on the edge of being kind of like vicious, like actually mean or actually dirty, and like that's one of those things that's like it's walking right up there.
Yeah. It's like how the classic way of getting out of any Muppet bit for the Muppet Show is if you haven't noticed this, and the minute you do, you realize how often they use it. The ways to get out of a Muppet skit, if you can't figure out an ending, is to eat someone, blow something up, or throw penguins in the air.
I mean, like one of my favorite things about British, about like not just British, like good sketch comedy is like how often you'll note that they just don't like finish a sketch. There's this really great Fry and Laurie sketch where they basically start out with this joke about how like a doctor is prescribing cigarettes, but then he turns out to be a cigarette salesman, and like finally Stephen Fry, who's playing the patient, says, "You know what I think? What do you think? I think that you had a really good idea for a sketch about not trusting common wisdom, and now you've overcomplicated it and you've blown your metaphor and you have no idea how to end the sketch except by using violence." And he challenges Laurie to end the sketch without using violence, and then Laurie leaves, and then you hear a chainsaw revving, and that's the end of the episode.
My favorite non-violent sketch comedy is a Monty Python bit about trying to buy a mattress. Where the salesman's like, "Oh, this one always goes 10 up, this one always goes 20 down. If you say this specific word to this one, he's gonna have to stand in a box and start singing Roll Britannia or something like that." And by the end of the episode, everyone's just standing in a box singing Roll Britannia. Like, it's so absurd.
Monty Python got away with that a lot because they would just like not have a punchline to the sketch.
Yeah, that's the thing that's like Brit. Like that is the one thing about like talking about Great Muppet Caper. I was watching Great Muppet Caper last night, and that is the most British Muppet movie because so many of its bits are like the scene where Piggy sneaks into the house is a lost Monty Python sketch, least of which because John Cleese is there. It is all a comedy of manners and not dealing with the obvious, there's Mr. Death is here, sort of inkling. But fun fact about this movie, going to LA that one time, the hot dog place they visit before getting the star map is a real hot dog place. I almost went to it, but the line was too long and or they were closed for renovations. I don't remember which, but there is a sick-ass comic book shop around the corner.
I mean, we've been talking about the Muppets as a British, an example of British comedy, and I do think it's interesting that the director of this movie and the lead writer. Oh no, James Siegel does have a writing credit. I was wrong.
Yeah.
That's on me. That makes the fact that you cast yourself dating Amy Adams even more suspicious, Jason.
Amy Adams was the last person cast.
I'm standing by it. What do I fucking know Jason Siegel from?
How I Met Your Mother.
That might be why I don't like him. I hate How I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Mother is very bad.
I'm sorry, Edric, if you like How I Met Your Mother. It's not an opinion I'm willing to defend.
I don't care. I never watched it.
Why?
It's an opinion I can defend because I watched a season of it before wanting to tear my goddamn hair out.
No, it's just like we've been talking about it as like British humor. It's interesting to me that the director of this movie is British, but his most famous work aside from this is helping co-create Flight of the Conchords and also a lot of Ali G stuff.
So Canadian and New Zealand?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm at this point unclear on how I feel about the Ali G show.
I don't want to know.
I like Flight of the Conchords a lot, though. Alfie the Racist Dragon is absolutely classic. Don't at me.
Oh, huh. James Bobbin worked on Percy Jackson and the Olympians, too. The show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I remember seeing that. He's a director, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's part of the directing crew. That doesn't surprise me. The directing of this movie is a lot of fun. I think this movie's strongest comment, or the strongest like thing about this movie, is that it does know how to use the camera for a joke. The bit about, wow, that was an expensive looking explosion. I can't believe we had that in the budget, but like not actually showing the explosion. That's a good gag.
That's a decent bit. One of the things I do like about Muppets as like a comedic centerpiece, a comedic element of a movie is like one of my recurring bugbears of modern comedy films is they're not so much written as like throw three comic actors in a room with the vague outline of a scene, let them ad-lib 10,000 hours, put it together in post. That is how a lot of them are shot. And with Muppets, you actually can't fucking do that. You have to actually write the script. You actually have to tell jokes with the camera. Because, like, it takes three people to move this goddamn thing.
Yeah, you gotta plan for the fact that your set is gonna look like Swiss cheese when they're not in the room.
So you gotta block, you gotta work around the fact that there are holes in the floor. It's good. It makes them actually make a movie. That sounds mean. I stand by it.
I do love calling Kermit Sir. There's something very funny about calling Kermit Sir. He's just Kermit, Pictures in my head makes me sad.
I didn't. Pictures in my head is like my ultimate example of the movie being more interested in the Muppets as like this great important thing. And I don't know, anytime a movie franchise starts getting interested in its own importance in the real world, my brain is just like my eyebrow is on the ceiling. Like,
I think I would be harsher to that ideal if we weren't in the current media climate we are in, where we are all clamoring for another Muppets movie and Disney will not give it to us because the puppeteers are unionized.
well, the puppeteers have unionized, and there is something like I like the ending where it turns out that like the Muppets coming back brought a lot of everyone was excited to see them. Turns out there were thousands of people waiting outside. They do a little bit of a my friends you bow to no one bit with Gwalter, which okay, fine. But also like Muppets Most Wanted didn't do great. The TV show they did right after that didn't do great. Like there's I don't know, it's a little sad. It's a little sad that I don't know if the Muppets really work in a modern context because like they keep trying and they keep bouncing off.
I think the thing that like kind of futzes around is first of all the guy they've got doing Kermit is bad. I get that I feel like I know we know it's Steve Whitmire's an asshole, but like the guy they currently got doing Kermit is bad. That's what like the one thing that is holding Muppets Haunted Mansion back for me is the few scenes we get of Kermit. But Dave Goelz is great as fucking Gonzo. And I think there is just not an interest in training the next generation of puppeteers, that like as soon as that Midgard that was all trained by Jim and Frank Oz is gone, we don't have anyone to play these characters afterwards. Which is, hey, another reason y'all should be supporting Sesame Street.
The collapse of puppeting as a mainstream as like a mainstream thing that you could get into film doing. You know, famously, you want to know who one of the puppeteers on the final big scene at the end of the Muppet movie was because they just needed so many puppeteers to work all those Muppets.
I think I know this.
Tim Burton.
Yeah,
And like, okay, Tim Burton hasn't made a good movie in
decades.
a while now, a hot fucking minute. But Tim Burton is a name. He is a name that the average film goer knows. He is a recognizable aesthetic. You know, speaking of comedy directors who can't actually do 20 minutes of ad lib, Wes Anderson, like him and Wes Anderson are like the only mainstream directors who I think the average person would recognize on sight. You know.
Yeah. Well, and maybe Taika Waititi, but Taika Waititi's more known as a writer than as a director. He doesn't have a distinct directing style, but he does have a distinct writing style.
I'm not quite off the Taika Waititi train, but man, I'm looking at the exit.
I haven't seen I didn't get to see Time Bandit enough to give a verdict one way or the other. But like the thing is that like we gotta kill the auteur theory of like directors having like being the only thing that people associate with bad movies. Because like 8 times out of 10, it's like, no, you're not mad at the director, you're mad at the writer. And 6 out of 10 times those are the same person and we must kill the writer director.
Mm-hmm.
But like other times you like watch a movie and you're like, no, you're not mad at the director. The directing's fine. You're mad at the writer for not writing a good story.
I mean, he wrote the last two movies that he made, neither of which I really liked very much. I'm still very up in the air on Jojo Rabbit. I guess we'll talk about it one day.
Well, I mean generally. Like I'm not talking about Taika specifically. I mean in general. Like the thing about like when you talk about directors who have a distinct style, gun to my head, I couldn't tell you what is distinct about any given director sans Burton and Anderson, but that's because they have like made it such a goddamn aesthetic that it has grown past their movies. TM. Like I do the few times the TikTok trends TM got it right was when they were all doing like gag Wes Anderson clips, and some of them were not fully understanding what the gag was, but the ones that got it were real goddamn good.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think that like directing style notwithstanding, we've gotten on so fucking of a tangent, Ellie.
That's what the show is.
It's just one big tangent. I feel so bad for my podcast tomorrow.
We are Tangent City here at the biggest night in podcasting, and you can't stop it.
How do we feel about Animal not being able to drum due to court-ordered anger management therapy? What did he do?
I wish it was more of a recurring thing. It only really comes up when it's introduced and when when he drums at the very end.
It also comes up in the middle when they're trying to rehearse and they can't keep the rhythm because there is no percussion.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's not a huge element. I want to know what he did. I want to see him like struggling more with that because Animal trying not to drum is Animal is really funny. Animal is always very funny.
Yeah.
Acting natural is a solid joke.
I do appreciate Dave Grohl being the human version of him for the Muppets. That's a funny gag.
Mm-hmm. Hey, there's a dude who I don't know. Are people actually mad at Dave Grohl? I can't tell.
I think it's like a 50-50. I cannot give a shit. We have so many general public, we have so many other men in Hollywood to be mad at. Can you like shitty men aside, sure he cheated on his fucking wife and had a kid out of wedlock. Who the fuck cares? Thousands of other rock stars have done that. This is not a new phenomenon.
Yeah, we all love Robin Williams, and he cheated on his wife. You know, it's my point was going to be like, I don't know, man. Cheating on your wife, that is a problem with your marriage. It makes you kind of a shitty dude, but not like a bad person. It's kind of grody. Given some articles on Vulture that came out this week,
We can't talk about it.
I can't talk about that. For the record, audience, for context, we're recording this on the 18th of January. I don't know. I can't bring myself to be mad at Dave Grohl. Whatever. His wife can be mad at him. I don't know him.
Yeah.
He drums. He plays the drums.
Yeah, it's the parasociality of it all. I can't believe I fell for Muppet Man is one of the funniest gags in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just Piggy's complete and utter anger because she's probably been in one at one point or another.
I don't know if this is like a problem that I have or just like a quirk that I have, but every time you get like X number of things in a trench coat doing the Little Rascals bit, it's always funny to me. One of my favorite BoJack Horseman gags is Vincent Adult Man.
It's the idea of three kobolds in a trench coat.
I did good at the business factory.
Yeah. Ed, talk, please.
Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that.
I'm trying to think of stuff to say, but like,
do you forget to take notes again?
I mean, there wasn't really much to take notes on. It was funny. It was cute. I do think it's criminal that Mary still said yes to Gary at the end.
It's a growth moment. The streets are arguably not all right, but I understand that for the sake of what this movie is doing, I understand where we went and how we got from A to B. And it seems like outside of this one little hiccup, their relationship is relatively strong. Like all of the kids know him on sight in her class. Like if this is the only major hiccup they ever experience, they're gonna be all right, you know?
Well, you bringing up Mary Edric reminds me of like I have in my notes, so the movie won Best Original Song for Man or Muppet. That, as much as I like this movie, that does come with a huge asterisk that only one other song was nominated that year, which is Real in Rio from Rio.
That movie is an absolute sand trap in my head because it is so bug nuts. Like, it is a very simple conservation movie with music done by will.i.am, which means some of those songs are the catchiest things you've ever heard in your fucking life for no goddamn reason. Anyway.
So like, it didn't exactly, go up against a full set. You can actually see in the Best Animated Feature, which is where you usually get your
obligatory kids movie.
Your Best Original Song nominations, Cat in Paris, Chico and Rita, Kung Fu Panda 2, Puss in Boots, and our winner, Rango. Not exactly big, like, original song movies.
Yeah, that was a weird year for the animated movie category, eh?
There was just no Disney movie out that year. We'll talk about Jack Black in a minute, speaking of Kung Fu Panda 2. But, like, so I like Man or Muppet a lot. I think it's a great song. Believe it or not, it actually came up in one of my racial politics class as, like, a quick summary of what being biracial is like.
Not incorrect, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I was sitting there going like, I'm watching this, and like, I admit that I went back to college a little bit older, but I'm just sitting there going like, we're adults, right? Anyway, I like it a lot as a song. I don't think it actually fits Gary's conflict very well. He is not caught between being a man and a Muppet. He is caught between like actually devoting time to his romantic relationship or babying his younger brother.
It's the Arrested Development hang up, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that like as a half metaphor it works. Like if you don't think like if you put on your critical thinking hat for too long and start to stare at it too long, you're going to make your head hurt, but it is blissfully too short to stick your hat on for too long, and there's something deeply funny about Jim Parsons being the human version of a Muppet.
Yeah, I think Jim
Hey.
Parsons
I nearly said "what the fuck" when Jim Parsons came on screen.
he is good casting as like a human Muppet. He looks like a Muppet.
A little bit, yeah.
He does.
But like I also so I'm going to let you in on a secret about having me on your own podcast, River, and also one that will explain this podcast. They welded my critical thinking hat onto my head and kind of fucked it up when they did it, so I can't take it off. I can't do it.
Understandable. Have a nice day. God, tomorrow is gonna suck.
I'm extremely excited about talking with you about that movie, River.
You're gonna watch me like bite a man's head off in the marketplace.
Cool.
That movie makes me viscerally angry. Anyway, that's tomorrow. Amy Adams' hair looks consistently good in this movie, and I do appreciate that.
I like Amy Adams a lot. I feel like outside of very specific moments, her agent doesn't like her very much.
No. Which is a shame because she's pretty much the gem in anything she's in.
I'm still extremely annoyed she didn't win anything or even get nominated, I think, for Arrival.
Truly! Arrival is a movie best summed up by the Brian David Gilbert quote, "What? Hell yeah. What?" I had to watch it for a class about aliens, which sure was a class I watched. In that paper, I had to cite both Brian David Gilbert quote and TV tropes, as well as all the lecture slides, and I still got to see on the paper because the TA was like, "You cited on academic sources," and I'm like, "Motherfucker, we are talking about communication with aliens, a thing that has not happened, that we've only expressed through fiction."
For the record, audience, Arrival was nominated for Picture, Director, Adapted Screenplay, Cinematography, Film Editing, Production Design, Sound Editing, and Sound Mixing, but no Best Actress. It did win Sound Editing, so it is eligible for this podcast.
Please let me talk about Arrival. I have so many complicated thoughts about that stupid fucking movie.
That movie fucking rules. We'll talk about it then.
I do love that Fozzie gets to keep his teddy bear. That's super cute. We Built This City is the correct song choice for that montage. It is a cheesy as fuck song, but it is the correct choice.
I do really like the gag where they do the high call and it's just Amy Adams doing it.
Yeah.
One thing that I didn't get to say when you mentioned the straights aren't okay, does this qualify for your podcast, River?
Like no, because the couple is already together.
Fair.
Getting the girl is not on the goal sheet, as it were.
Gary and Mary are together, but are Kermit and Miss Piggy.
Good point.
I mean, maybe.
River, I'm going to tell you, as I've told you multiple times, you handed me a loose set of rules. I'm going to try to break them.
I guess I could theoretically slap it on the list.
Yes.
Christ above. But that means I can also slap like Muppets Take Manhattan in the OG Muppets movie.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying.
I guess fair enough. I'll do it after recording.
Yeah.
You gotta have some stuff that makes your heart happy in between all the painful stuff.
I do have a lot of things on that list that make my heart happy. For example, Someone Like You is on that list. Only You is on that list. Angus Thong's Perfect Snogging is on that list. The Kidnapping of Jack Black Exchange is the most D&D party convo I have ever seen in my life. Like, the whole kidnapping Jack Black sequence is a D&D party mission.
It is a D&D party mission. And it's also like that and the travel by map joke are probably my two favorite jokes in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I straightforwardly could imagine our D&D characters having that conversation.
Oh, 1,000%. And who is who?
Alania is Kermit.
Eladia is Kermit by working together to kidnap people.
Jack Black, this was like before Jack Black. He burned all of his goodwill all at once, didn't he?
Truly. And he's sort of like playing against type in this movie, which I think is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is why this is such a good, strong Jack Black performance, is because he's playing against type. It's sort of like how his two best roles are maybe possibly this School of Rock, and even though I fucking cannot stand School of Rock as a movie, and The Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're all movies that play to like your specific brand of Jack Black, and I think that Jack Black got typecast and he's never truly been happy with that.
My first introduction to Jack Black was still him showing up as a pretty major character in an episode of The X-Files and getting fucking wrecked in the third act.
That's incredible.
He gets struck by lightning.
Incredible.
Go watch The X-Files.
Oh, God. Why didn't you start a podcast about that?
Because I already wrote 500,000 words reviewing every episode of The X-Files, River.
That's very fair. The original Muppet theme song is a near perfect theme song.
It is.
Another song that sparks joy almost immediately in your heart and soul.
Yeah, you hear it and you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
Good times are happening ahead.
Yeah. I love that they did include a classic 15 minutes to curtain, Mr. Black. That is some classic. They had the opportunity and they took it.
Mm-hmm.
Barbershop Quartet Smells Like Teen Spirit is fucking hilarious.
It is very funny. I am a little annoyed about the chickens doing fuck you while audibly doing the extra syllable to make sure we know it's the clean version. Come on, if you're going to cluck it, you need to cluck the dirty version. Get fucked.
Truly. Like, come on, give us that.
And I feel like, honestly, fuck you is a very Muppets joke of a song. Its core joke is it sounds really upbeat and cheerful, and its chorus is fuck you.
Fuck you and fuck her too.
And fun fact, my dad threw such a fit over me listening to that song when I was like 13.
Oh my god.
Like, but he let me listen to Kid Rock when I was 4.
Kid Rock is a mistake, so jot that down.
Yeah, that's yeah, real, huh?
Like, seriously, I do not get this man, and like the shit he would take issue with me listening to.
I will say, I do kind of miss Frank Oz in this movie.
Yeah.
I love the man. He's been semi-retired since since around the time this movie came out.
He pops up every once in a while in like a cameo gag.
Him showing up to puppet Yoda in The Last Jedi is just the best.
Yeah, and he popped up in Knives Out. He's the lawyer.
Mm-hmm. But like, I understand why he didn't want to show up. I have to imagine, it's difficult to be one of the last of the original run of puppeteers.
Yeah.
From that era. But I miss him. I miss his Fozzie. And Fozzie sounds good in this movie. Kermit will never sound like 100% right, but he's a good Fozzie. But Frank, there's a good Fozzie in this movie.
Yeah, and I like the thing is that like, first of all, anyone getting a bit of a vibe from Fozzie and Kermit in this one? Because like that initial conversation where Fozzie is very clearly like trying to not immediately leap back into the fray, and Kermit is just like softly pleading like, no, we need you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that more than anything Kermit said to Piggy.
See, it's funny because when you first commented that in the chat last night, I was like, wait, aren't they twins?
But like Caper's the exception, not the rule.
I think they are twins in Caper. I think Caper is, broadly speaking, a Muppets as characters.
Caper blatantly states we are playing characters in its opening number as part of Hey a Movie.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than like letting the audience assume that they are themselves. Like they are playing themselves in name only
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want to create like new character names for the Muppets. Like,
I do love the gold standard of the post Henson death Muppet movies was and will probably continue to be Christmas Carol.
right, because that's Brian's movie. That is Brian writing one giant last filmic eulogy to his dad, being like, "I am gonna try my best."
Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out good. Look at Hayao Miyazaki's kid.
Yeah,
Man, I can't wait to talk about Boy and the Heron on here.
I actually really like Boy and a Heron, but like
Boy and the Heron, I love Boy and the Heron.
Boy and the Heron sounds so correct, and that is the best. That is like the best praise I can give this movie. Give that movie, having only seen it once, is it sounds so correct. The sound designer needs to be given a smooch on the forehead and a raise, and also Christian Bale doing a silly New York accent again. My beloved.
Is Newsies eligible for this podcast? No, I don't have to
No,
look it up. I don't even have to look it up.
it is not. But I love that movie so much.
But like, I think that like one of my favorite things about that movie, and that's how you can tell that it is a Muppets as characters story, is like they introduce Gonzo and Rizzo is just Rizzo, while Gonzo is Charles Dickens. That's really fucking funny.
Yeah, that is another quintessential Muppet joke.
Mm-hmm.
The I'm here to tell a story and I'm here for the snacks.
I will also say, since we're obviously going to talk a little bit about the other Muppet movies, we already have been. She says like we're not 50 minutes into this recording, because I think this is the only one that's eligible for.
Yes, it is.
For this.
One of the songs from Manhattan was nominated but lost.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think, like, we were talking about jokes that are like on the edge of dirty, and like it took me until I was an adult to realize what the punchline was with the two old men in Christmas Carol being named Jacob and Robert Marley. I'm a little disappointed we don't see more of the two, Statler and Waldorf. I love those guys.
Yeah, Statler and Waldorf are very fun, and I assume that some of it has to do again with like Statler and Waldorf are such a weird, like them getting the exposition joke for this movie was probably the smart move. There is always an exposition joke in the more like plot centric Muppet movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's one in the Great Muppet Caper, Diane Ray gets to deliver it with like, "What's plot exposition? It has to go somewhere."
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like the Muppet movies that have a plot and are not considered with the gags always get a "this is the exposition" joke. And I think giving "this is the exposition" joke to Statler and Waldorf is correct. And I also love that like when you go into Kermit's office, you get to see all the photos of all the Guild guest stars, and the one that is front and center is the one with Jim.
Mm-hmm.
That's very sweet.
Yeah, I've sort of like hinted a few times that I don't like the positioning of the Muppets as like an innocent work from a bygone age where things are better, and like I don't buy that in the slightest. The Muppets were on TV during the 80s. I know that like people who are nostalgic for Ghostbusters and ET don't like to hear this, but the 80s fucking sucked.
Yeah. The OG Ghostbusters is the most Republican movie ever made.
Right. And like I get, there's this really great interview with one of the guys who's behind Stranger Things, and I don't like Stranger Things very much. I haven't watched past like the first season.
I have too many thoughts about Stranger Things. I will get into them at some point, but I literally started writing an 11-page breakdown of that I would eventually turn into a video essay trying to break out all of my fucking feelings about that stupid fucking TV franchise.
And like one of the things that sort of like makes Stranger Things interesting to me, and they have a quote from one of the two guys behind it, that it's not actually based on the 80s. It's like our impression of the 80s. And like, what movies I think of when I think of what the 80s were actually like? I think of like The King of Comedy or Wall Street, or like it's not a movie from the 80s, like American Psycho. Like the 80s were not a good time for like anybody.
Yeah. I think that's like why one of my favorite 80s documentaries was one that MTV made literally right as the decade ended. It made it in like 1990 as part of their New Year's thing.
Mhm.
And they basically pulled a bunch of celebrities and asked them to talk about the year, and all of them have such wild creative, like wild thoughts about it. Like they asked journalist Michael, George Michael is there, and he's talking about how like, yeah, I did like a fucking Coke commercial because it was fucking money, like it was a paycheck. Spike Lee is there. Everyone has these sprawling opinions, but the editor, because they had access to MTV's music library, does some absolute buck wild song choices. And my favorite by far is playing footage of Reagan and playing Queen's I'm the Great Pretender over top of it. It is king shit editing choices. It's on YouTube. If you just search like MTV 80s doc, I think it pops up. Or at least it used to be on YouTube. I don't know if it's still there, but it is one of my favorite retrospectives about the 80s because it was made in time and it was made by people who lived through it, and some of whom are no longer with us, but it like has this such a wide spectrum of like people talking about it. It's so interesting.
Right, and that's sort of like the end point that I'm sort of driving at when I talk about this, because like I do think that that society, like there is something to the Muppets as something that brings a lot of people together, but I don't like the idea of positioning them as something very innocent, and they were always kind of like a bit mean, a bit cynical, a bit, and that's what makes them good. They don't like talk down to people.
Yeah.
I really liked Muppet Christmas Carol as a kid because like it gets genuinely fucking scary at points.
Yeah, I couldn't watch the OG. Like I watched the OG Muppet movie a lot as a kid. The fucking frog lobotomy scene scared the crap out of me.
Hmm.
Like, what are you gonna do to poor Kermit?
So like, and I didn't really like bring it up when we did it, but that was always like that was my impression of I don't like that positioning, and I think that the movie being is at its best when it's more subtle about that, when it's just like here's a picture of Jim Henson as opposed to here's a whole song about how great the Muppets were. I don't know. Like I think the Muppets were great, but I don't really. One of my problems with a lot of modern nostalgia bait media, and the Muppets was a very early warning shot of what this movie in specific is what I mean when I say the Muppets, because like we're getting adverbs and verbs and names, proper nouns
Yeah.
confused around here. But this movie was a very early warning shot of what a lot of nostalgia bait media was gonna be like in the 2010s and 2020s. This was before Force Awakens kicked in, which was all about Star Wars's legacy, the Ghostbusters sequel, which sure does exist.
But I do think that this is perhaps the best one of the bunch, partially because it has the benefit of getting in the door early, so nothing is as tired as it will come to be.
Hmm.
But it is also, again, Jason Segel wrote this because he felt that the Muppets needed to be around for people.
Hmm.
And I think that coming from a place of love and coming from a place of warmth is the place you have to come from if you're going to make something, because you understand why it ticks. And like The Force Awakens is my favorite only because there are so many acting choices in that movie that are very much read like we are a cadre of 19 and 20-year-olds trying to put our lives together, and Poe sort of getting to be the exhausted one was the right choice. But I have too many thoughts about The Force Awakens, not to be expressed here. But like the idea that like if you're gonna do this, is the, like I said at the beginning, this is the movie that logically comes out of the Muppets having not been on our screens for so long.
13 years.
And the fact that we are all clamoring for another one, like shaking the bars of our cages. And the thing is that like anytime somebody pitches like talks about doing another Muppet movie, they're never talking about doing another Muppets as themselves movie. They're talking about the Muppets as character movies. They're talking about doing, take out all of the human actors in a movie and shove the Muppets in there and keep the one human. We're talking about doing the Benoit Blanc crossover.
Which. Okay, I'm putting this on the record here. I've gone on the record elsewhere. There's more than one human in every single Muppet movie,
Yeah,
y'all.
there is, there's always one or two like central human characters and everybody else's cameos. And so like I think that arguably if the Muppets were to come back in filmic form, you have to do Muppets as characters again. You cannot have them be themselves, partially because, again, that mid-range of the puppeteers that were trained by Jim are dying off, or like just retiring because they're getting older, and we haven't, fully backfilled the way they were supposed to. And so, like, that is, if you get them as characters, there is a lot more leeway in their performances because you're not comparing them to Jim, and you're not comparing them to Frank, and you're not comparing them to Richard Hunt, who plays Scooter, and I think it was Statler, and what have you. And a lot of his work is in Fraggle Rock, but he's one of the few gay puppeteers. And so, like, I think that's Disney. Hey, Disney, if you're listening to us and you want to know how the fuck you deal with the Muppets, first of all, you pay your puppeteers. They're unionized. Pay them appropriately. Shell out the money. I know you can do it. Just fucking do it. Number 2.
You pay me.
You pay us. Number 2, my Venmo is. No, I don't have Venmo. My Cash App is.
No, I was making a joke about how the fact, like, Disney does pay me.
Yeah, but, like, you gotta do the Muppets as characters. You gotta do another, Great Muppet Caper. You gotta do something like, a Muppets Christmas Carol. You gotta do one of these, like, the Muppets are not playing themselves, they are playing characters, and they just so happen to bring their sensibilities to it, I think that is their best path forward. Because, again, like, the problem with all the modern Muppet movies, or the hiccups they've been having, is that they've been the Muppets as themselves, and we have too much nostalgia tied up in the movies about Muppets as themselves. Like, the core trilogy of the OG Muppet movies, except Great Muppet Caper, are the Muppets as themselves movies, and you're never going to get those again because Jim isn't here.
And he's not coming back.
And I think, like, ultimately, your best bet is to make a movie where the Muppets are playing characters, because that gives every puppeteer more freedom, just a smidge more, so long as they are still recognizable enough to be the characters, to get along and get fun with it. Also, not enough electric mayhem in this movie.
If you want an example of how they fucked up welding my thinking cap to my head, one of the thoughts that I just had, like, in this conversation is, like, it's January 18th as we record this. Yes, audience, I know I record really early. And 2 days ago, we lost David Lynch, who is one of my favorite directors. None of his movies are eligible for this pod because God is dead and we're alone in an uncaring universe.
And despite you specifically.
And despite me specifically. But part of that thought is coming from the fact that, like, much like the puppeteers who are retiring or dying, David Lynch is a completely irreplaceable artist. You will never see his like again. And once this generation of puppeteers who were trained by Henson are gone, I don't know if we're going to get back to that. But also, like, the distressing poetry of it is, like, David Lynch's final filmed project, the final scene of his last film project, not counting shorts, was the last episode of Twin Peaks: The Return, which is a 25 years later sequel to a popular nostalgia property. And it ends on a note of trying to recapture the past, trying to fix the past rather than look forward to the future or to the present, or now to the present. Will ruin everything, will destroy the world, will leave you confused and adrift and aimless. It's an incredibly bleak downer ending, but I think that you're right. If they want to keep making Muppet movies, they have to stop looking back at what existed then and look forward to what can exist now. I refuse to believe that there aren't people out there who would love to be puppeteers if they're willing to train them. And like that actually makes me ask, as our first timer on this movie, and as someone who hasn't really engaged with the Muppets yet, are you tempted to engage with the old Muppet stuff now, Edric?
I mean, sure. I mean, I have too much stuff on my to watch list.
Trust me, you can knock out an episode of the Muppets in like 20 minutes tops. Like, they are not long episodes.
The only way you get through your to watch list is by watching stuff.
The only hiccup is that it is incredibly of its time, so finding actors who you recognize for other work gets a little challenging, especially in the early seasons. If I have to recommend starting anywhere, start with the Star Wars tie-in episode, which is so fucking goofy. The Harry Belafonte episode, which reminds me that humanity is good, actually. And the Liza Minnelli episode, which I do believe is a proto example of what the Great Muppet Caper would come to be, because it is basically a noir story. It is a noir mystery story that happens to star the Muppets and occasionally break into song. And it has Liza Minnelli doing the Copacabana with a Muppet, and it's so good.
I'll have to keep that in mind when if and when I do check it out.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm to go back to your point about how you hate that it's kind of the Muppets are representative of a purer and more simpler time.
Mm-hmm.
Ellie, how much you hate that. I think part of that nostalgia bait that the people like to portray the Muppets as being comes from people who grew up in that time
Mm-hmm.
and didn't really grow up knowing how awful the 80s really were.
Yeah, I don't have any personal nostalgia for the 80s because I was born in 1990. But I don't know, like I feel like that it's the same thing with you end up missing what makes the Muppets special when you focus on them as something innocent. And I will also say, like, whatever, if someone tells you you can't watch like the Muppet movie or the Muppets Take Manhattan without watching the show, kick them in the shins. You absolutely can.
Oh, I've never heard that complaint, but they are incorrect. Yeah, no, go watch the OG Muppet movie and the Muppets Take Manhattan. They are basically function as the sequels to themselves. And the only connection is the idea that the Muppets are a group of traveling actors,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the story of how they came together. But the other thing that I think is also important to this, looking forward for the Muppets, and Ellie's point about training the puppeteers, that is the other thing that is missing, is there isn't that in network of training puppeteers, because like we said, like Jim was training everybody who came in, and if not him, then Frank, and if not Frank, then one of the other head puppeteers who was playing one of the main characters. And that network doesn't exist anymore because no one wants to train anybody on the job, and everyone is expecting 5 years experience. I'm not bitter. What? No.
Being a puppeteer isn't really a viable path unless you are working with Sesame Street or the Muppets. You know,
And this is why we should all care about Sesame Street and protect its right to exist. Fuck you, David Zaslav.
official position of the biggest night in podcasting. Fuck you, David Zaslav.
Go donate to Sesame Street Workshop. I am no longer asking.
I reference like The Thing and Little Shop of Horrors, but like those are just like the famous examples. They needed a lot of puppeteers in the 70s and 80s. A lot of, Star Wars famously has a lot of puppets.
Yeah.
And that's just like not the case anymore. That's just not.
Yeah.
There's unless you get an internship at Sesame Workshop or at the Muppets.
And that is why BB-8 is the best new droid from current Star Wars, is because he is a real puppet.
I think that if there is going to be a new generation of puppeteers, it's going to come from people who pilot the droids or the puppets at Disney World. The droid controllers who pilot BB-8 when he rolls around the Star Wars land, or who control the Muppets for. I'm sure they have a Muppet show at Disney World. I don't fucking know.
They do in and out. There was one in Magic Kingdom for a while, but where it was at risk of bleaching the puppets really badly. So they couldn't do like, that's the problem, is that like they do them outdoors and there is a risk of damage to the puppet more often than not.
Mm-hmm. It's actually, I guess my final note would be, I've referenced several times in the last few episodes, I work for Disney right now, or I'm work for a company that subcontracts to Disney, and so like one of the twee things they do that I don't really love about Disney is like they have twee names for a lot of stuff. They don't call their theme park workers, they call them
Cast members.
So the tech repair spot in the building I work in is called Bunsen and Beaker's Workshop.
That is a little silly.
That's cute.
It's cute. It can get old a little bit, but
But also, like, calling your IT department Bunsen and Beaker's Workshop just means that something is either going to catch on fire, blow up, or shrink. Because that's like 90% of Bunsen and Beaker's experiments, is they all blow up, shrink, or catch fire. I feel so bad for Beaker. I do love that my father's favorite Muppet is Beaker.
I love Beaker so much. Ed, do you have any final thoughts?
Honestly, not too many. It was a cute movie. Great first exposure to the Muppets, especially because it seems to really cater to someone who hasn't grown up with the Muppets.
Mm-hmm.
But I only wish that I had gotten the chance to watch it back then when it first came out. That is the only thing I have to really say. Yeah.
It does work. I remember when I came out of it as a kid, I remember really liking it, even though I was not in the position where I didn't grow up with the Muppets, because my parents had the entire series on DVDs, and including like a couple of collections of like specific episodes on like little DVDs. And I watched the shit out of the Mark Hamill, Harry Belafonte. I forget who the third episode was on that DVD, but I remember watching the shit out of it. And every time it opens with "Hi, I'm Brian Henson," introducing the episode. And I remember the one he did for the Harry Belafonte episode was talking about how Harry performed at Jim's funeral, which if you ever need reminders that humanity may be good, actually, it's the Harry Belafonte episode of the Muppets, because God, it makes it's so many emotions in a tight packed little thing. But yeah, it's also very funny because like if none of you have seen a photo of Brian Henson, looking at photos of him back then, you're like, oh yeah, that sure is Jim's kid. But if you look at older if you look at him now, you're like, oh, that is a carbon copy.
Mm-hmm.
Someone hit print on the carbon copier that day. Brian looks so much like his dad. It's scary.
I will say, usually I spend a little bit more time talking about the other movies that won this year, in the year of the Oscars. That's not really necessary this year. This was nominated for one award and it won it. It wasn't a very tight award, as I said. It was between it and Rio, which is a movie I've never seen and probably never will.
It's a very straightforward, simplistic little movie about conservation with music by will.i.am, which makes it absolutely bug nuts, but also the catchiest thing on planet Earth.
I will say that like there was a lot of nostalgia for older time periods at the 84th Academy Awards, but like except for The Iron Lady, which we'll fucking get there.
Is that the Margaret Thatcher movie?
That is the Margaret fucking
Ew!
Thatcher movie.
Ew!
It was not usually there's not a lot of nostalgia for the 80s. There was like The Help, which is the 50s. There's The Artist, which is the 30s. There's Hugo, which is the 1910s.
Hugo is a very, very strange and good movie.
I love Hugo.
It is a mediocre adaptation of the book, as somebody who deeply loved the book as a kid. It is a mediocre adaptation, but it understands what made the book work for a film, and I have come around to love it in that respect. Don't know how I feel about giving us Ace Butterfield, though.
I will, someday we'll talk about Hugo. I will sum it up right now with the hottest of hot takes. Martin Scorsese, good at making movies.
Correct. I think that might have been my first Scorsese because I saw it in theaters when it came out.
It was a lot of people's first Scorsese positive. They've actually covered another movie from this year before, which was the Iranian film A Separation. Great movie. But yeah, it was just like a very nostalgic year at the Oscars. I guess we'll talk about The Artist and Hugo someday. I'm not gonna. Oh, Midnight in Paris, another nostalgia for the 30s. We'll talk about Woody Allen one day. It's literally unavoidable.
It's gonna suck the entire time.
It's gonna suck the entire time. You know what? I think I don't want to end it on that note.
One day I will not cry at the Rainbow Connection. Yesterday was not that day.
I don't want to end it on a note of talking about Woody fucking Allen. Everyone, what's your favorite joke from this movie?
You inspire people to kidnap people, to work together, to kidnap people. Now we all agree that Mr. the Frog, that a celebrity is not a people.
Well, you stole mine. You know what? My favorite single joke, and this is like a deeply telling joke, but also very funny, is when like all the celebrities come to do the phone calls, and one of the kids is like, "Are you one of the TMNTs?"
Yes, I am.
That was the kid from Modern Family.
Yeah.
I've not watched. I was certain he was something famous. I didn't know what. Ed, what's your favorite joke from the movie?
Probably the acting natural joke when they kidnap him. Jack Black.
My other favorite joke is Neil Patrick Harris on the phones being like, "No, I don't know why I'm not hosting this." Which, correct, Neil Patrick Harris was also the obvious pick.
Neil Patrick Harris is like genetically designed to host award ceremonies.
I mean, yes. God, why do I know his episode of Glee?
And that's what you missed on Glee. River, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
I do. You can find me on Blue Sky at Dreams Rebel. You can occasionally also find me on Twitter at Dreams Rebel because I'm still there because the NHL refuses to move to Blue Sky because they hate me specifically. You can find me on my own website, blog.filmlion.online, where I am attempting to do the Great MCU rewatch and talk about television there. And you can find me on my own podcast, at The Straights Aren't All Right, where I gather a bunch of queers together, make them watch straight rom-coms, and try to answer the question, are the straights, like, okay? Our next episode is gonna be about Love Actually, which is gonna... Anyway.
They recruited me for that one, so excited.
Yeah.
Ed, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
You can find me on Tumblr and Blue Sky at Edric Orion. Occasionally on Tumblr, I'll post a Song of Ice and Fire hot takes and meta, because that series has my whole ass, unfortunately.
I osmosized the entirety of the lore in a single weekend in college, and it has never left me since. I have too many thoughts and feelings about Ray Garliana and Elia Martell, but that's neither here nor there.
I'm sitting here emotionally like telling myself over and over, Winds of Winter is never coming out. You don't need to get excited every year. Shut the fuck up. As always, you can find me, Ellie, on Tumblr at Football in Tuxedos with dashes between the words. You can find me on Blue Sky, Medium, and Letterboxd at LSR42. And you can find this podcast on Blue Sky at Biggest Night Pod. We are available on both Spotify and YouTube. And if you follow us on YouTube, be sure to give us a subscribe, maybe like and comment on the videos so that you can tell me which parts you like and which parts you don't. And that's it for our episode on the Muppets. Thanks both to Ed and River for coming out.
Hell yeah.
Speaking of stuff from the 90s, we are going back to 1993 for our next episode. For an episode that will finally answer the question why the girl from True Blood has an Oscar, we're talking about The Piano. I love... So I will try to convince River to cover The Piano on their pod.
No! It doesn't end happily.
It does end happily! It does end happily!
For who?
For Harvey Keitel and Ada McGrath.
God.
We'll see you there for The Piano. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.